Welcome to Generation Dragons, episode 39. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. We really appreciate it. I hope you really enjoyed our last episode and the episode before that and the episode before that. But today, Steve and I, Steve, how are you?
Clint, doing well, my man. Cheers.
Cheers.
Love the Zelda Cup.
So yummy. Yeah, how are you? How are you?
Same old, my friend. Kind of getting excited about Halo. I keep digging into this stuff and wanted to play. I still haven't played the online thing yet. Like I downloaded the multiplayer beta or whatever, but I still haven't played it.
Right.
But God, yeah. I even bought a new Master Chief. Gave my old one to my buddy Stavros, but it comes with a download code.
Nice.
So no idea what it actually does, because you just go to Halo Waypoint and I put in the code and it told me I will get a notification when the download becomes available, but didn't say what it was.
No, it must be some sort of hack.
Thing.
Yeah, in-game multiplayer stuff. Now, see, I've done the same thing with a bunch of Rockstar tabs. I've probably had too much Rockstar in the last 2 months. And, I got the shakes now. But, hey, all for the games, man. All for the games.
That's what we're here for.
And unfortunately, don't get me started on the Halo toys, because as much as I've wanted to buy them, they are so poor quality in comparison to the McFarlane toys that were released.
That's kind of what it was at. I gave the other one away because I was replacing it. Literally, he just goes on top of my Series X and kind of sits on top with his gun like this. And I gave it to my buddy because I was replacing it. Now that I had it in hand today, I'm like, I move it and the leg does this kind of thing. Dunk, dunk. It's like there's no rigidness. I do like the mobility of it, but his arm can't even go all the way straight. It's always slightly bent.
Yeah.
There's like little things. He looks really good. But there's some things with the quality that you're saying that I see on it. Like it just.
Yeah, I haven't even bought any of the new ones. The ones done by Jaguar. I don't like the paint jobs on them. I've looked at all like different sizes and stuff like that. Now, like the Warthog and whatnot look good, but I haven't jumped on that. Now, I am on the Mega Bloks kick though, so I do like the Mega Bloks Halo stuff. I'm starting to get really comfortable with those ones.
So I really like the figures of the Mega Bloks. They are so good, like especially if you compared them to a Lego figure, right? Like a Lego figure has to look that way. That's kind of their thing. But the Mega Block ones, they have all the articulation. Like I have the castle behind me, Castle Grayskull, and those characters are just phenomenal. So
it must be behind the Vita behind you,
right? That's forgot the green screen here. Yeah.
Yeah. No, Steve. So it was, as much as we can talk about Halo all day and every day, and just continuously talk about Halo, we're here about talking about some systems that died a little too early. We'll say
failed consoles. We'll say. But take that with a grain of salt. I put some things on this list that I think we might disagree on if it failed or not.
Yeah, especially the white one to the right of you and the left of me on my screen. That's not a failure.
Saturn. Dreamcast.
And the one that you are representing on your shirt, and that's to the right or left of you, right of me over there, the Wii U. That was not a failure to me. If people didn't buy it, that's their fault. But hey, some of the biggest games on the Switch were originally released on the Wii U, and they just fucking remastered, and I spent $80 on them again. So anyways,
that's Nintendo's motto. Let's keep giving you the same game.
And I will
play that same song again. All right.
Yeah, so Steve, let's go from top to bottom of kind of what you have. I know you have a kind of mix and match of everything that's in here, but
yeah, I kind of just added them as I thought of them.
I think the biggest thing right off the bat is the most recent failure, and it's the controller that's right behind you, the Google Stadia. So in my opinion, now I haven't played it, and so I can't say to myself it's a failure, but I didn't buy it because I don't like that. I don't own physical copy of the game. The streaming was up and down from what I've heard, even with people I've known that own Stadia. They said up and down, was really up and down. I didn't like that. It wasn't, they should have went with something similar to Game Pass, where it was like, hey, you pay your monthly fee and then you have access to games. Where
Well,
this
they did do a
was,
monthly fee. They
you
kind of, it
paid
was
a monthly
$10 a
fee, but
month
you still had to pay $80 for that Assassin's Creed
for the.
game you wanted to play.
Oh, right. So I haven't played it either. I almost jumped on that in the beginning because I get excited about any new tech. And then I got looking at it and having to pay another subscription. I got enough subscriptions coming out my ass. I just didn't see offering anything that I really wanted. I'm more of a console gamer over a PC gamer. I thought like the idea that I could just pick up the controller, plug in a Chromecast type device and play it wherever. But I was talking to a buddy of mine when it first came out, and he had it for a bit before I decided not to get it. And he's like, it feels like I'm always playing on an old PC. And that just always stuck with me when he said that. Because I'm like, oh, I don't want that experience. It's more to me, it was like, that was released almost like a beta, not like a full-fledged product to me. It wasn't really, but that's how it felt. When I read and talked.
Hey, I mean, if you look at the news on Google and how they approach Stadia, they definitely stopped. They just more or less given up on Stadia. It's still there, it's still accessible, but like you said, I think it was kind of like almost like a beta test. Hey guys, we're Google and this is what we can do. Now come join us and we'll help you stream your games and work on that to compete against Microsoft and the Azure and stuff like that. So, I mean, maybe that's exactly what it is. Is it a failure? Sure. Yeah. Was it too early? I think it might have been too early. How they approached it, probably the wrong approach. But hey, you never know. Google could be powering PlayStation's streaming service in 5 years. All on the backbone of Stadia.
Right.
So,
I think the first one you said is probably the worst one on the list. Until we get further, we might find something worse. But
maybe the
Stadia failed pretty
one,
bad.
The second one under your list.
Yeah, I would say that. And I jumped on that Indie Starter right in the beginning, the Kickstarter campaign, and I was pretty excited about it. And then before we mention it, just see if you can guess what it is, anyone that's listening, I felt like when I bought this was just a glorified Android phone I hooked up to my TV. Everything I could do on this thing, I could do on my Android phone, but I could do more on my Android phone. So what we're talking about here is the Ouya.
Ouya.
So,
I mean, you owned one, Steve. I mean, before you get into like your experience with it and all that stuff, I played it here and there at your place, but I liked the concept. I thought it was a good idea. That's kind of, preemptive to the Apple Arcade and what they've done with what Apple has done, right? However, Google being Google and just being like an open box and allowing anyone to do whatever they want with it, that's what I think kind of killed it. So nobody really sat there and developed games for the Ouya that was specifically a Google-based or Android-based device, right? So give us your rundown, your experience, what your thoughts. And
overall, the thing I didn't like about it is I felt like I was just playing Android games on my TV, which I thought was great because some of the games that they were bringing to it in the beginning looked like, AAA games and they were trying to bring in. When I first got it, it was like 200 free games, which was more like 200 games you could try. But vendors quickly pulled that away and wanted to sell the games, make money. And that everyone's like, well, no, why am I buying these games and get a much better one on my Xbox, PlayStation, and then other games that they could just play on their Android, So I think that's really why it died. The controller was a little hokey. I thought it was kind of neat when I first got it because it's more or less like an Xbox controller, but it has a touchpad on the center, sort of like the PS4 and 5. But the buttons would get stuck. And I found like just a D-pad weak, but I was pretty excited in the beginning, but playing it in practice, I was like, I feel like I'm just playing my Android. And by then, I think it was Android 4 point something, and phones were way above that by then. So anyway, the idea was cool, but
it didn't stay long enough. I mean, for me, okay, so the next one we have on here, well, like I said, we'll go by age. Nvidia Shield. Yes, it's a failure, but I wouldn't even call it a console, right? It's just
to get another Android box.
But it was a PC add-on, was it not? I thought the Shield was you needed
PC architecture, I think.
Yeah, you needed not a Steam account or so. You needed another account. Like,
I thought you did need a Steam account for it. Now, I think
it was something like that, right? Like it was like a stream to from your PC to this handheld. Which, hey, there was a cool concept. Hopefully, the Steam Deck. I mean, the way Steam Deck looks like, it's an upgrade to that, and I'm looking forward to the Steam Deck. But yeah, the Nvidia Shield kind of went up and then just completely just disappeared.
Flopped.
No one talked about it. Exactly. It was a big flop. I can't talk to experience. I never had one, and I would never plan on buying it.
I almost did. I did see it at Canada Computers, and I hummed and hawed about it. And I'm like, and I didn't pick it up. I a little bit regret not picking it up because I thought it was pretty cool, and I do collect those type of things. But yeah, you're right. All right, what do you want to go on to next?
So I think the next one here would be the monster machine that you're wearing on your chest and the one that's beside you.
The Wii U.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So yes, I mean, a failure. If you look at the total units sold, 12 million total units, that's pretty bad in comparison to the Switch of 100. I think Switch is 98 million, maybe over 100 mil by now.
It's almost like a stopgap from going from the Wii to the Switch.
Hey, man, think of N64 to GameCube. Actually, if you look at well, that's what I'm saying. It's the N64. Super Nintendo held it, right? Then N64 came in, did okay, but not to the comparison of a Super Nintendo. GameCube did okay, but not comparison to that. It was better than the N64, but not as good as Super Nintendo. And then the Wii came in and just blew everything away, right? Then Nintendo decided to release the Wii U. I was on that boat hard. I loved my Wii U. I still love my Wii U. It still sits upstairs. Still throw in. It's got virtual console games like Game Boy Advance games and DS games you can play on there. Loving all those features. I mean, I wouldn't say a good 30 to 40% of my Switch library is games that I rebought on that were Wii U games I rebought. Games were excellent. The Nintendo strict games, even Zombie U and things like that, were awesome. But yeah, I mean, failure, teach their own. But I would. The system itself was okay. A lot of even like the TV controls, being able to do that on the gamepad, and when you could hook it up to your TV and your cable box or whatever, and go through that, really cool features. I thought it. But yeah, go ahead. Steve,
I liked it, but I didn't jump on it as big as you did. I did have one. I still have it hooked up to the main TV for the same reasons as you. But I found for the better part of its life, it literally just became a handheld YouTube device for my youngest.
Yeah.
Like for all the games that she literally just used it to watch YouTube while she was eating breakfast or something like that. And it's sad. I think by the time she was really using it, I already had the Switch anyway.
Right.
But yeah, for the most of its life, that's what it was used for.
But, no.
So
that, I mean, we don't have it on the list, but depends on who you talk to. The bad boy that's up to your over your shoulder, not the cell phone, but the other one, the PS Vita. I mean, if you lived in Japan and like Japanese RPGs and Japanese styles games, the PS Vita was an excellent console. If you're from North America and did not like JRPGs, so the Vita itself was great. No, I mean, man, I liked the Uncharted games. I liked playing the Uncharted game. I liked playing Resistance on it.
PS4 controller.
Yeah,
that was awesome. When I was first got my PS4 and I only had the one controller, I used that as a second controller.
Well, I mean,
some games, but.
Dude, it sits under my monitor on my desk, and I occasionally just pick it up and start playing PlayStation, like PlayStation All-Star Battle All-Stars, and stuff like that, right? Like, I liked the Vita. Now, it did not compete against the 3DS to the extent, but neither did the PSP. I mean, call it a failure. I'm sure Sony may assume it was a failure. The units sold wasn't as great as it could have been, but this console itself was definitely excellent. I think what killed the Vita, the proprietary memory cards. That's what killed it.
Yeah, there's that. So this, I know it's on the picture here, but it is literally not something I put together. Something I grabbed off the internet like 2 minutes before I jumped on this. So I probably wouldn't put it there. The N-Gage that you see back there, for sure. But sure, hum and haw about Dreamcast and Wii U. I did wear the shirt, so I went. But anyway, let's move on to the next. A lot. I'll let you pick because I can talk about any of these. So
yeah, so we'll go. I mean, Dreamcast. I can't say it, but yes, it was kind of a failure. And so,
why?
Pour one out for my homie.
But why was it a failure? It had such potential. I love the VMUs. I just love that idea.
It was a failure because it did not have enough third-party support. Right, we didn't have the EAs, the Ubisofts, and those guys of the world on the Dreamcast. It didn't have a DVD player built into it, like the PlayStation 2 had to compete. It was so easy to steal and make steal games, whatever, copy games on and play them. And then it seemed like Sega's support in North America was just going the wayside. It was just dying. There wasn't there. They didn't have the.
It's a shame because it's a good little console. Any console back in the day that needed wired controllers that had 4 ports in it, God, like, yes, please, you know. I did forget about not having a DVD player around PS2 coming out with that. So that definitely was a huge thing if you're comparing the two. But it came out well before the PlayStation 2. And I just thought it was going to be the system, right? I thought they were going to recover from the Saturn and all that. But anyway,
I mean, it's too close to home to call the Dreamcast a failure. I still don't think it's a failure. It's one of my favorite systems, if not still my favorite system of all time. A little bias on that front, but I mean, hey, it did. We talked about this before. 56K modem. You could have done DSL at some point. It had VoIP, voice over IP. Before now, where voice over IP is the thing to use in business worlds. Like that was 20 years ago they had it in the system, right? So
to think of it like that, 22 years ago. Well, when it launched anyway. So man.
So it's just stuff like
$99.99.
Yeah. So next up, to me, it would be, we'll just clump in all of Sega consoles in between the Genesis and the Dreamcast, but the Sega Saturn. And I mean, you lived the experience more so than I did. So
yeah, and that was so I actually chose right. I could only afford one or the other. I would have bought a Saturn over the PlayStation 1, except my competitors. I worked for a place called Mega Power Video Games, but EB Games, or Electronic Boutique back then, had a wicked deal where you got $10 for any SNES game towards the purchase to, I think it was 10 or more, but the minimum was 10 as a trade. And so I traded in a whole whack of NHL like 94, 95, 96, 97, both on SNES, on Madden. Like, it was just tons of sports games I didn't care about and wouldn't play again. And so I got like $150 just like with crap games plus all the normal stuff I changed. So it was just a no-brainer. That's why I picked the PlayStation. But that Saturn, man, I remember coming into the store not even knowing it was going to be there because they did a surprise launch where, oh, by the way, it's available now. And our stores luckily got a couple. I think got 3. I came in for my shift because I did an evening shift, and my boss is like, "Hey, what's that over there?" I'm like, "The TV." What the hell? Is that a Saturn? I was like, Daytona was playing, right? And that song always stuck into my head. Yeah. I'm gonna download that soundtrack. I've got to hear it again. But it's such a shame, especially even the price point that came out. And then everyone's like, "Oh, the PlayStation's cheaper." This is like by the time PlayStation came out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's not. The Saturn was $100 more, but you didn't have to buy a memory card, and you didn't have to buy. There's 2 things. I think it came with a pack-in game, Virtual Fighter, and it you didn't need a memory card. You could save right to the system. Where the Sony, you had to buy a game and you had to buy a memory card, which made it actually more expensive at initial launch price point. So, but if you remember the famous speech, $2.99.
To ask Sony Computer Entertainment President of America, Steve Reyes, to join me for a brief presentation. $2.99.
Versus when Saturn came out and said it was $3.99, and then right after. So anyway, it's too bad, but I don't know, man. They lost all their American support. There was no sports games for the thing, for example, and that was one of the big things in the US. That was a big hit. And then, anyway, sorry, I got off on a rant. I'll let you give your opinions because you're a big Sega fanboy too.
Yeah, so that's it. I mean, I lived the Saturn life after the fact, right? So my brother bought it from his friend who actually got a PlayStation 1 at the time. So his buddy was selling it. So hey, games were great if you liked certain types of games. However, like you said, it was just the time it came out. They didn't have third-party support. Excuse me. At that time, Sega wasn't doing their own sports game like they did with the Dreamcast and 2K Sports and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, but hey, it is what it is. In that same time frame, actually more closer to the Dreamcast era, but that one that's beside you, the N-Gage. Call it a failed console. I'd call it a failed phone, and Nokia probably took a pretty big hit on that. But
and I have two different models of it.
Hey, if you ever need one to sit out on display out here.
I got to dig them out because now that you mention it, I haven't touched and looked. I've looked at the box. That's it. Every time I get into that stuff, but I need to take it out. And then the battery's been in there for like 2 decades. It's probably
nice and swollen. That's it. I mean, with the N-Gage, I thought it was going to be. I mean, everyone thought was going to be, that was what phones and gaming was going to be. Funny enough, again, 20 years later, look where we are with phones and games, right? Like
touchscreen did it back then. That for the early 2000s technology of how a phone was, it didn't suit a game console or a phone. Like if you look at that, dialing someone and calling them, then you held it to your side of your head like this, you look like you're holding a flat football or something on the side of your head.
Yeah,
and then you had to change the games by taking the battery out. Like what the hell?
Yeah, that was the downfall, was taking the game, changing the batteries and stuff like that. And
vertical
then, like
screen
said,
too. So it didn't have a widescreen; it was vertical. So
the other one would be in that same, like I said, same era, Sega CD, Sega 32X. But again, I wouldn't call it a failed console. It was just add-ons, and I think it was just because it was more of a, to me, and I don't, I'm no industry expert. I would maybe consider myself sort of an industry expert, but hey, I don't get paid big bucks to say I am. Those two were tests, right? They were really prepping how do we build games? How do we make games with this amount of power and on CDs and then go from there, right? And it was just to add for add-ons for Genesis.
So I was pretty much a day one Sega CD and 32X guy. And back then everything was just full motion video games. It was just crazy. Like it just digitized people, and like you'd have your actions or whatever you're doing depending on the game. And I'm like, man, that's where they thought the future was going to be.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's it. You know what, Steve? I'm going to leave the next one up to you, good sir.
All right. Well, if we're just talking about the Sega CD and whatnot, why don't we talk about the 3DO right around the same thing?
Right.
Time. So it came out a little earlier, 92 if I remember right. But the whole idea of the system was you buy the rights and make the system yourself. Anyone could put games on it. But the sucker came out at an $800 and some odd price point back then. It is insanely expensive. Yes, I had one, not right away. I ended up buying a used one that was, like $300. I loved it though. The games on it were great, but who really is going to buy a system at $850? Even when it was discounted, it was still hundreds of dollars and more expensive than any of the other competition out there.
Right.
So that's what killed 3DO, I think. There was also lack of control. Like just anyone could put crap on it.
Well, yeah, I was just gonna say, looking at the rest of the list, there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of they took the arcade bases and put it inside console Geo? And make it a home console. Yeah. Right. Even like Philips CDI, that one there was, again, not something I own, but could have been a cool thing. However, CDs at the time were super expensive. CD players were decently expensive at the time. So you make this system, you're a TV and electronics company making a system in the 90s, competing against the likes of Nintendo and Sega. Like, what are you doing, right?
And then the controller was garbage. Like, I don't know if you remember what the controller was. It was like a remote control with a round dial on it.
Yeah, right.
You could get a Genesis controller for it. I don't remember if you had to have the Genesis module added to do that, but I might be remembering it wrong. But the initial CDI that came out was just looked like a VCR, and the games you played with this odd controller. It just apparently, if I remember right, that wasn't really what that controller was meant for. That was more for menu and stuff, and you were supposed to buy another controller. And I think it was like a Genesis controller, but. Right. You're already spending all that money and you probably don't know what you're buying. You just think you're getting the best and you're trying to play everything with this piece of crap. But anyway, yeah, let's move on to the next since we're going through. You grab the next one.
Yeah, well, that's so TurboGrafx 16 or the PC engine is known as it's known in Japan. Mm-hmm. I mean, in North America, it was definitely a failure. There are a few people who know what TurboGrafx are. The games that are on it, again, another one of those systems that were almost trying to be arcadey, like an arcade system, just to be at home.
I really wanted that one I wanted that one big time to succeed. I love the fact that the little Hue cards that came with it, you could buy the portable system, the Turbo Express, same games in the consoles for the portable. And to me, that was like mind blowing because I was used to like Game Boy and things like that versus Nintendo, totally separate, and I think Game Gear was around then too, and just coming out, and it's the links and everything that was all separate. Right. So the fact that you could bring one game and just move it back and forth, it was great. I really wanted to see that succeed. I'm not really sure why it never picked up like the others. I think it might have been also been price point back then too.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, it was more expensive, easier to come by because nobody was buying it, but more expensive. And if I do remember now, this is just, I mean, I wasn't at the age of buying them, but I'm pretty sure the games were more expensive than the NES or Super NES at the time, right? Like Genesis, Super NES games, I'm pretty sure were cheaper than the Turbo games.
Oh, yeah. However, if I remember, I don't think they're always cheaper. It was more that there's a lot more options for cheaper games because they had such a bigger library. I think when the games all came out, they might have been a little bit more expensive, like maybe $10. Well, I guess back then that was actually, it'd be like more like 20 today, right? So
and then the other, I mean, again, failure in North America, not so much in Japan. I know they had PC Engine had a very strong following in Japan through the time. I mean, the next one to me, Steve, again, I'm just going to be popping these up for you, and you can really put in your input because you would have had way more experience with it. But the Atari Jaguar, and this is Atari coming back from the dead, more or less, trying to put out their system, right?
It was the hype about the Atari that more than anything else, this console sucked. Like if you have to come down to it and look at the games. 64-bit system, even though it wasn't, it was two 32-bit RISC processors, and they just 32 and 32 is 64. So that math is just messed up that they call it a 64-bit system. But anyway, this 32-bit system really still looked like crap compared to the 16-bit systems around it. Like the games on a Genesis and Super Nintendo just blew it out of the water. Like if you look at Star Fox and I forget the name of the flight game on Atari right now, but it was like night and day. I'd have to look it up, but I just remember playing that game and then already having been playing Star Fox, I'm like, Star Fox just blows it out of the water. But yeah, it was all hype, right? And they had the whole slogan, do the math, and that's it. It sucked. I think it was pricey too. And
yeah, that makes sense. The other one here that I could have a little bit of input on is the Virtual Boy. If you think about it, 20-ish years later, they make the 3DS without glasses, which is exactly what they did in Virtual Boy, right? So, I mean, I when I got to play it, because nobody I knew had one when I was growing up, and I would play it at Microplay or whatever the case may be. It was cool. I mean, everything in red, and if you had no depth perception, you couldn't play the games. And I know it made a lot of people sick and gave
headache machine
seizures.
Is what we used to call it.
But yeah, no, it was definitely a cool concept that ended up working out, 20 years later. But
sort of, yeah. But it was sort of marketed back then as almost like a portable thing because you could play with batteries, right? And that, but it's just too heavy and big to lug around like easily. I played it right from the get-go. One of my buddies' older brothers bought it, and that's the unit I have today because I ended up getting it from him later. But yeah, it's essentially just a headache machine. You put your neck in there and it just you'd have to experience it to understand what you have. But literally monochrome vector type traced graphics, and it was not very good. And so I think because it wasn't really portable, the games were kind of hokey. The whole system was maybe 13 games in the library or a few more than that. I don't remember. It never took off.
Never took off. I mean, excuse me. The other ones on here, you've got the Atari 5200. Man, I don't even know what the Atari 5200 is. What is that?
So it's a upgraded, the next console after 2600, roughly. But it never caught on. There's already better things out at the time, and
then that would have come out. That would have come out. So the Atari 2600, and then the whole video game boom or
crash
bust happened. Yeah, crash. So then the Atari put out the 5200. Okay,
it was. So Nintendo was around, I think, or right around then. But one of the things is it didn't play Atari 2600 games at first. I think that was fixed, or I don't remember how it worked now, but I'm pretty sure you couldn't, and then you could. I don't know if there's an adapter. I'd have to remember, but there was a whole thing like people were like, why, do we need this kind of thing? We just had that whole crash. There was no confidence in the market. And then it was more like almost like a mini PC / game console, if I remember right. But yeah, no one wanted to bother with it. So I don't remember well enough because I think a friend had it kind of thing, and that's it.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, the other ones here, Steve, this is all on you, good sir. Commodore 64.
So it's not the Commodore 64 because that did well. There was a Commodore 64 console, not the home computer with the keyboard and everything. It's like a standalone little console to play games. And it never really took off or did anything, never really sold. The only reason I know about it is from researching Commodore 64 before and like checking out stuff. And when I was modding my Mini, and I'm like, oh, what's that? So anyway, it kind of was on my list as something to talk about it, but I don't really know why it failed or anything more than that it existed. So
yeah, man, I think a lot of these other ones. Have you had experience with the other ones here, Steve? Because the other ones on your list, I've never heard of.
Okay, so the Apple Pippin or Apple Bandai Pippin.
Okay.
Basically, it was a console in the mid '90s. Apple's kick at the can at it, but very, very, very expensive. Never took off. Didn't kind of thing.
Sounds like Apple, typical Apple, right?
Yeah. There's the Fairchild Channel F. I mentioned that because I only know of it, and it comes up all the time in video game history. It was the first cartridge-based console system. It was just too far ahead of its time and ahead of things. It's like 1976. I think the Atari came out the year after, but really didn't get kind of popular until towards the end. But Channel F just never took off.
So when you wrote that, Steve, I had to look it up because Fairchild Channel is a Canadian Cantonese channel. So I was like,
yeah, no, I was talking about the Cantonese channel.
Yeah, I was like, whoa, they made a console before. Maybe they started a TV channel. And then I'm like, was it based in Hong Kong or something like that? And that's how it kind of goes. And then I googled it after. I was like, it doesn't. It doesn't.
So if you look at the Fairchild,
American dude.
There's something I want to remember. I don't know if I'm crossing this with a different console, but I think it had TV overlays for it. So you'd play a game like hockey, but then you put the overlay on it, and then it have like the net and stuff like that.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah. So next I have the Action Max. I really should have put that in the honorable mentions. It was a VCR console type thing. So you put games in, and you had things sort of like Captain Power, where you shoot back and forth. So it was static. Nothing ever changed. So
oh man, Steve, I didn't realize you had all this other stuff here. Let's just get into handhelds then, good sir. Because all the other
we got to mention really quickly the Vextrex. That was pretty cool. Do you know what the Vextrex is?
No,
Vextrex?
Not at all.
It's a built-in console. It stands vertically, meaning a monitor is built into the console, and it's the only console that was ever vector-based games. So
you're talking like it was the console that they made the old school Star Wars games.
It looked like that.
Fly.
Yeah. And so this console didn't do well at all. It only lasted, I think, a year. But it's one of those things in the collector markets that are such a niche thing that people want, that it's way more popular nowadays than it ever was back then. But yeah, just to move on, because I got a bunch of stuff people won't even heard of. Let's just jump into handhelds.
Yeah, man. So we talked about the N-Gage. You threw up some stuff on here to even realize, and I was going to bring up one of them already. So, and I'm going to put the Atari Lynx and the Sega Nomad kind of together. And the only reason why I say that was that we were talking about how take that hybrid console at the time, right? You could go and play your Genesis games, your Atari games on the go, and
different. So the Atari Lynx had its own separate games, where the Nomad was just Genesis games, right? So
right. Well, I thought the Lynx was capable of playing Atari. No, it was
the console games. Like the Atari Jaguar games are big, like a Genesis kind of thing, maybe bigger.
Right.
But the Lynx games are like cards that you pop in with a curled back to pull out. So it's like sort of like a Hue card from TG16. There's no memory on it, meaning no writable memory. It's just what it is when you plug it in, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
The Nomad is sorry, Nathan, if you're listening to this, but the Nomad is by far better than the Atari Lynx. It's simply because better graphics, played your console games, and you can hook it up to a TV, plug in a second controller. It's basically a mini Genesis with a screen.
Yeah. Oh yeah. True.
Yeah.
The PS Vita, we talked about that as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Psp Go. Now, Psp Go, if we released it now, I think would be a completely different story than it was.
Yeah,
when it got
now
released.
There's a lot more about streaming and getting things
digital gaming and stuff like that. That's it. The PSP, when the PSP came out, and they released PSP Go, that's when Sony started jumping on the more digital based games, and kind of not many people had the PSP Go. I just recently bought one and it doesn't work. I have to fix it. But it was cool. Exactly. And Game.com. Steve, I don't know what that is.
It was a Tiger-based handheld game thing.
Okay.
It was kind of shitty. I was just this was me just doing my own research on failed handhelds, and that came up. I don't really remember it at all. But
okay. Yeah, I mean the Neo Geo Pocket Color, I do recall that. I mean, I never had one or never played one, but I have heard stories of it. And again, I think it sounds like a lot of the Neo Geo issue of being too expensive.
Yep.
It came out around the time the Game Gear and the Game Boy were out, and it just didn't take off because it was just too expensive. However, looked beautiful from what I've heard and for the videos and stuff like that. Games looked good on it, but it was just cost prohibitive, and that's what killed it.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, and then we could jump. Go ahead, Steve.
Honorable mentions.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things I put in here were just not necessarily fails, but they were, bad things that happened to systems maybe, or just things that didn't go well.
Yes, like the N64 HD never came out this way, right? So that was a Japanese only.
It wasn't supposed to be, if I remember right. It just got delayed and delayed over and over.
Yeah.
And then I think like one of the big games that was supposed to be on it was Donkey Kong, ended up coming to 64 anyway. And then by the time it finally got launched, it was mail order, I think, only in Japan.
Yeah, 64 DD. Yeah, and even Animal Crossing, right? The Animal Crossing game that came out on the GameCube was actually originally released in Japan for the N64 DD. So it kind of aligns itself there. I mean, 360. So one thing about PS Classic. I mean, I would have to agree with you on that as an honorable mention. I mean, the PlayStation 1, the Psp was excellent. However, that PlayStation Classic was not excellent. It was a very unfortunate thing. They should have released it with the DualShock controllers. They released it with Cool Borders 1 versus like the other good Cool Borders games, and some of the sequels that were much better than the originals. I
modded mine, so it's a lot better. But to be honest, when I first got it, I was like, we had a better selection. This is like an afterthought kind of a mini console. Yeah. So what else we got on here?
I mean, Sega Channel.
Such potential. That's why it's honorable mention, ahead of its time.
Pour one out for my homie.
Yep.
No, that's what it is. Yeah. Again, Sega was way ahead of its time at the time, right? Like you were streaming games on the Sega Channel. And now that's all everyone talks about with the Xbox Game Pass and streaming Game Pass and playing Game Pass.
Right, look at where we are, and that's like X-Band I have on the list here. That has such potential. Like it let people connect, regardless if you had a Sony or a Sega or a Super Nintendo. You could play over broadband or dial-up. Sorry, back then, against your friends. Like it was unheard of back then. That's what Sega Channel was doing a little bit. Sega Channel was not so much the competition. It was more on-demand games. But X-Band was like competition. Play with your friends.
Yeah. There's a few on here that you're just bringing me back like on live. I remember when that was kind of announced. Announced and kind of put out there again, cloud gaming similar to Stadia, again 10 years ago. And where did that go? Right? Like it just never happened.
Ahead of its time, right? Visionaries.
Yep. Gaikai, that one was now PlayStation and PlayStation Now. Maybe somebody jumped on that a little too early because it's not to the same level as the Game Pass. But it's on its way.
Yeah. We hope.
Yeah.
Better at time.
We hope.
Yeah.
We hope. But yeah, Steve, I think that's
the rest don't really need to be mentioned. Oh, except I always got to give my plug to Naboo. Honorable mention because it never really had a chance and a shot, way too ahead of its time. But man, 1982 Naboo networks and on-demand games and whatnot, and electronic banking, just so far ahead of its time, so far out of people's price points, and it just never materialized further than a test market here. But Naboo networks, amazing. Anyway.
Excellent. So Steve, I mean, this was a great list of failed consoles. Many have very deep cuts and hurt me so much because it's pretty much all of Sega consoles.
100% agree, man.
Oh, deep cuts. Steve.
We should say next week we'll be talking about Masters of the Universe Revelation.
Yes, and we're going to give our inputs. We'll give Steve will go back to his to our prediction and or thought process. Or not thought process, but the conversation we had post Masters of the Universe last time. And and have that conversation. So next week, stay tuned. We're going to be talking Masters of the Universe, Revelations, and our thoughts. Post that, we're going to do a prediction. So the following episode after that, we're going to talk about predictions of who's going to win at the Video Game Awards. Again, this is Jeff Keighley's Video Game Awards. When it's like it's aired on TV. It used to be aired on Spike TV. I think now it's only on YouTube and whatnot, and Twitch and Discord.
Be interesting to see if it lines up at all with the Joystick Awards that just happened today.
And then we've got IGN and Polygon and those. Well, Polygon, Kotaku, and all of the other websites to see how they do. But yeah, with those, that's what's coming up in the next month. And then we'll do a couple holidays. Next will be my birthday cast.
That's
and
right.
Then we'll do Christmas cast. We'll take a little break for a little bit. Probably not, because we're just doing this for shits and giggles anyways, folks. But yeah, Steve, as always, my friend.
Keep collecting.
Keep gaming.
Keep safe.
Yeah.
And Krenger became the mighty Battle Cat. And I became Steve Man, the most powerful nerd in the universe.
Steve-o.